There's a lot of it. Club 1348. Speaking on the, where's my title here? Saving Women's Sports. Susan.
Saving women's sports. Let the fireworks begin, Tom. Athletic programs are widely accepted as an integral part of the high school and college experience, and that was certainly the case for me. I played basketball, softball, and tennis in high school, and basketball at the collegiate level. Playing sports provided me with important lessons about self-discipline, teamwork, success, and failure, as well as the joy and shared experience that being part of a team can bring. Let's take a look at the history of women's sports. On June 23, 1972, Title IX of the Education Amendments Act was enacted by Congress and signed into law by President Richard Nixon. Now, what is Title IX? Title IX prohibits institutions that receive federal funding from excluding students from participating in educational and athletic programs on the basis of sex. The key word here is sex. No excluding students from athletic programs based on sex. Title IX began its journey through all three branches of government when the representative from Hawaii, Patsy Mink, who's recognized as the major author and sponsor, introduced it to Congress. When Patsy died in 2002, Title IX was renamed the Patsy Mink Equal Opportunity in Education Act, and she was given the Medal of Freedom. Now, even though I was only 9 years old when Title IX was signed into law, and I didn't understand the implications, I'm grateful for Title IX and the opportunities that the Act provided me while growing up, because those lessons I learned by participating in sports are some of my fondest memories, and they shaped me into who I am. Today, women's sports are in danger of being eliminated. In a press release published in December of 2023 by the U.S. Committee on Oversight and Accountability, the committee stated, quote, "The Biden administration is seeking to drastically alter Title IX by redefining sex discrimination to include gender identity." Redefining sex discrimination to include gender identity. The National Collegiate Athletic Association, aka the NCAA, defines gender identity as one's inner concept of self as a male or female, or both or neither. One's gender identity can be the same or different as the gender assigned at birth. Transgender describes an individual whose gender doesn't match the person's sex at birth. So, for example, a male to female transgender person is someone who is born with a male body, but who identifies as a girl or woman. And here's the problem. By redefining sex discrimination to include gender identity, the current administration was on the path to eradicate female-only sports, spaces, and scholarships at institutions receiving federal funding. This means that your daughters, granddaughters, nieces, and other girls or women in your life will not have or would not have the same ability to compete in sports as I did. Permitting biological males to compete in women's sports is unfair to girls, women, and girls, period. I don't have to tell you that males have physiological advantages over females. You already know this. Males are larger in body size and stature. They have greater muscle mass, bone density, increased lung capacity, and larger hearts. Even athletes of similar size exhibit performance disparities based on sex. Think about it a moment. We're hearing more and more stories in the news about transgender males who are participating in female sports, but you don't hear about the reverse at all. Nothing about transgender women competing on male sports teams. Now, why is that? Because female transgenders wouldn't have a chance of competing against male athletes. There is a difference between the sexes, And this is a non-issue for men's sports, but it's a major issue for women's sports. So consider the story of collegiate women's standout Riley Gaines, as described in Hillsdale College's April and May publication called Pursuing Truth and Defending Liberty. Here's her story. Riley was a swimmer at the University of Kentucky and a Southeastern Conference champion. But when she went to the NCAA championship, she was placed in the position of having to swim against a man going by the name of Leah Thomas, formerly known as Will Thomas. For 3 years, Will Thomas had competed quite unremarkably as a member of the University of Pennsylvania's men's swimming team. He then identified as a woman, was allowed to swim for the University of Pennsylvania's women's team, and he became a women's national champion. So here you have Riley and her teammates who'd spent their entire lives training to be the best in women's swimming, just to have to compete against a man and be told to celebrate it. ESPN actually honored him, Will/Leah Thomas, during their Women's History Month special as one of the top female athletes of the year. Really? Give me a break. And on top of that unfair competition, the women were also forced to share a locker room with Thomas. No pre-warning that they'd have to undress in front of a 6'4", fully intact, 22-year-old male. And what about right here in our own community? You may have seen the story. 16-year-old cross-country runner at MLK High School in Riverside, her name's Riley Morrow, happens to be a Riley too, made a plea to the school board about a transgender male that was placed on her team, displacing 2 girls who were previously on the team, I might add. So as Riley spoke at the school board meeting, here's what she said, and this is a quote: "It's not okay that I have to be in a position where I'm going to practice and I have to see a male in booty shorts around me. As a 16-year-old girl, I don't find that as a safe environment. And going into a locker room and seeing males in there, I don't find that safe at all." Oh my gosh, this is a 16-year-old girl. It's bad enough when this happens at the collegiate level, but with a high schooler, I can't even imagine what that would have felt like for me to deal with a boy identifying and dressed up as a girl on one of my sports teams. Gosh, what our kids are going through. How did we get to this sport? How did we get to this point in women's sports? By redefining sex discrimination in Title IX to include gender identity, the current administration will eradicate, or they would have eradicated, thank God, they would have eradicated female-only sports as we know them. That administration's out. We simply cannot permit biological males to compete in women's sports. And let me share a few more reasons why women's sports, and especially team sports, is so important to girls, to young girls and women. First of all, high school girls and college women who compete in team sports are less likely to get pregnant. That's a good thing. They have better grades. There's less depression. They're more confident in themselves. And get this, 80% of all Fortune 500 female executives played team sports and considered themselves tomboys and athletes when they were young. I'm one of those 80%. Back to Riley Gaines, our University of Kentucky swimmer. Fortunately, Riley was given an opportunity to tell her story through the Leadership Institute, and now she's the primary advocate for the protection of women's rights to privacy, safety, and equal opportunity in women's sports. So what can you do? Well, number one, protect your daughter or your granddaughter or your niece's rights in women's sports by speaking up. Educate yourself by visiting Riley Gaines' website. It's RileyGainesCenter.org. RileyGainesCenter.org. You can request Riley or one of her ambassadors to speak at a school event that maybe your daughter or granddaughter attends, or you can make a donation so that Riley and team can continue to get the message out about this inherent unfairness and help block the rewriting of Title IX. In closing, it's only a matter of time before women's sports will be negatively impacted and forever changed if gender identity is included in Title IX. Let's not let that happen. Let's stop this insanity.